So I'm going to be talking to you about a bit of behavioural science and how we can use that to engage people to change their behaviours. I think we've really moved on from this idea that you can train people once a year with a bit of e-learning and expect that that's really going to change behaviour. And so what I want to dig into here is actually nudge theory, which is the science of understanding how people really act, how they really behave, and how you can steer them to do things that are essentially in their best interest. So many of you will come across nudge theory. I'll set out some examples, but really it was kind of came into fame through Thaler and Sunstein's book, Nudge. And it's really about this idea of steering people to help them make decisions that are essentially in their best interest. And it's kind of this contrast with this idea of forcing methods. So we used to think you had to kind of force people, you push them to do something, and that can create some reactance. But instead what we're going to do is trying to shape the architecture in which they're going to make a choice and help them make the right choice. And a great example could be if you want your kids to tidy their room, then you can shout at them and to tidy the room, which is a more forcing, drastic measure, obviously, or you can play the tidy up game. Now you get the same outcome, but one, you've made it fun, and the other, you've had to force people. But some other examples could be, well, if you want to save money, then budgeting, that's quite complicated, it's quite hard to try and get that right. Or when you go to the supermarket, always pick up a basket and never take the trolley. The same with dieting, tracking calories and things like that can be quite hard. What about always using a smaller plate? So these are subtle things where you're changing the environment around which you're making a decision, and that helps you make the decision that's essentially in your best interests. So how do you do it? It's about choice architecture. And that architecture exists around us whether we like it or not. So you can shape it, and I'll give you some examples of that in a second. It's really powerful, and you are already communicating with your staff. So it would be remiss not to try and make that communication better by using some of these techniques, and I'll show you how in a second. What I think is a really nice extension to nudge theory, this is slightly more recent, is this concept of a boost. Because a true nudge is actually just shaping the architecture and then leaving someone to make a decision. It's completely up to them. It's called a parentalistic or paternalistic nudge. The idea with a boost is that at the same time, you actually improve the person's ability to make the right decision. So you're just putting a little bit of education in there at the same time. So we all go to the supermarket. You might not think very hard about what's on the top shelf in your eye line, or what's at the end of an aisle, or what's right next to the till, but I tell you the supermarket is thinking very, very hard about that. And that's a really good example of choice architecture in your everyday life. I'll skip through some of these because there's lots of examples, but Google have realised that, and who could have guessed this, giving people free food is not particularly good for their health. And so what they were finding is that people were eating all the M&Ms, all the fizzy drinks, and that wasn't really good. They couldn't take that away, there'd be a massive upheaval. So what they did is they used nudge theory. So now the M&Ms are in opaque pots, and all the pistachio nuts and fancy things like that are in clear pots. All the fizzy drinks are in the cupboard at the bottom behind a door they can't see through, and all the water and the juices and stuff are in front with things that you can see. So very subtle nudge theory, nothing's been taken away, but they're steering people's behaviour. So here's some examples you might have seen in around town. When you're into nudge theory, you do find yourself taking photos of strange things. So I did take that photo, I have to admit. But this is a little football goal with a ball in for the gentlemen who aren't very good at hitting a target. Quite why we need this, I don't know. But again, it's that nudge theory concept. You will have all seen this on escalators in London, and this can help you cross the road. Be very careful. You can get nudges wrong. And this one could be fatal. So why does this work? Well, we used to think that we all made decisions in this really deliberate way, that we're thinking really hard about every decision we make because we're rational human beings. But what we've realised is actually that rationality is bounded because the human brain is taking on so much information. It needs to decide what it's going to look at and what it's going to ignore. And so we have these things called heuristics, rules of thumb, that help us make these decisions. And actually, they're vital. We need these. We need these to survive and evolve to get to where we are. But they also have in these cognitive biases that sometimes mean we make mistakes. And so there's lots of biases out there. Social proof is a good one. Are other people doing this? Well, we might do it. Authority is a strong bias. So it's why you see men in white coats advertising toothpaste, because that authority figure is going to make us want to buy it. But you'll recognise all of these from the bad guys doing this stuff too. This is what's being used in phishing lures. It's the CEO email saying, go and buy those Amazon vouchers. It's that scarcity that scares you into thinking, oh no, I've been locked out of my account, I must click that link. But we can use these same things ourselves in our communication. So there's a great model, one of the original models that came out of the behavioural sciences team, called the mind space model. I haven't got time to go into all of this, but essentially every letter in mind space is a thing you can think about to shape and improve the message. So that could be, who's the messenger? Is it someone in authority? What are the social norms? How do I make this inciting and salient and new? I can prime people, like even a poster or that button, the reporting button primes people to be thinking about this. So lots of different things. The scientists came out with the mind space model, the government sent them away, that's got too many letters in, it's far too complicated, so they came back with the EAST model. So the letters standing for a nudge should be easy, or the behaviour you want should be easy. It should be attractive, you've got to want to do it. It's got to be social, and it's got to be timely. And this element of timeliness is really important, and I'll come back to that. So, how do we apply this? Well, look, you're already communicating people. So think about using these models. Think about making your messaging more impactful when you do it. And here's a really interesting example. Now, a 10% uplift in this email they were already sending, but they tweaked it. Might not seem much, but if this is Tesco's getting people to sign up for $6.99 a month, or $7.99 I'm sure it is now, then that's a lot of money. And all they did was change it subtly. So first they framed it as a loss, and we all we value losses, or we fear losses much more than we value gains. They had this friendly delivery driver. I love this idea of being in a hot state of receiving my groceries. I don't quite know what that means. Smiling face, and we mimic that positivity. The eyes are looking towards the message. And I love this idea of authority. So if it had just said £75 roughly, maybe, but £76.44, that must be true because it's such a precise number. And it gave them this 10% uplift. And you look at that and you think, that would never work on me. But that is exactly what's all over the internet. All these things saying there's only one left in the shop and someone else is looking to book this property, and that pressures us into acting. What has this got to do with cybersecurity? Well, look, we want to be steering people to change their behaviours. And traditional training relies on a slightly flawed assumption, which is you give people knowledge that will impact their intention to act. And I suppose it does when I think about it now. Yeah, I know how to be secure, therefore I'm not going to click risky links. But that's just not how your brain works in the moment when you get that phishing attack comes in that plays to your urgency, or maybe you are expecting a parcel and you really want it to arrive on time, and so you click that link, even though it's not really from DHL. So context interferes, the macro context interferes, which is the culture of the organisation, but the micro context of what you're doing at that very moment in time, even down to possibly what the weather's like and whether you're in a good mood and therefore you're slightly less scanning these emails and less suspicious of the world. So BJ Fogg also has a behavioural model that digs into this and helps us think about behaviour. So very similar to EAST, he talks about this element of motivation to act in a particular way, the ability, but also the idea of some sort of prompt, something that nudges you to actually make you make that decision. Because without the prompt, you're really kind of just sort of pootling along, not really thinking about stuff. And so if we look at where secure decisions sit in this, they probably sit about here, which is that people aren't particularly motivated. Now, that's not because they don't care about security, because they do, but actually there's a lot of other motivations driving them at work. For example, the boss breathing down your neck to do something, so maybe you do send that thing home so you can print it out or something. So there's lots of motivations competing. So if motivation is low, then it needs to be easy. Security needs to be the easy route all the time, and then we can help people act in a secure way. So this is one of the key messages that comes out of this, but also this idea of which order do you put these things in. So as a security industry, we're always focused on motivation. Let's scare everyone into acting securely. But what Fogg says is motivation is the hardest lever of change. And I think that's because there are all these competing motivations. I want to keep fit, I want to eat cake. These things clash, and then where are you? Which one are you going to do at any point in time? And so what Fogg says is start with a prompt. If you can just trigger people to stop and think by giving them some sort of nudge, some sort of prompt, then you've done it. You've achieved the behaviour. If that's not enough, make it easy. If that's not enough, then start layering on the motivation. So a very quick example of what that could look like. Start with the prompt in terms of helping people with security around email. So timeliness is key. Where does that need to be? It needs to be in your inbox. So a reporting button is sort of a prompt that could be effective. After a while, you'll habituate to it, but also that banner that people put on their inbound emails. Top tip there, if you can convince your IT team to change the color of that banner every 3 to 6 months, then it's salient again and your brain sees it again. It's the same with the Microsoft Mail tooltips. Lovely idea. After 3 to 6 months, your brain is filtering out that bit of the screen every day because it's always there and it always looks the same. Then think about ability. Don't overcomplicate it. Just give people a really easy out, which is if you're not sure, ask. If you're not sure, report it. And then think about motivation. And here's where you might use the social proof or reciprocity. The security team have blocked this much. You do your bit. That's another effective thing. So what could that look like if you actually wanted to build a behavioural campaign? And this is where we would come in with red flags type nudges. Maybe as you open your inbox, a little reminder that says, think about phishing. And this came from our research we did with Cardiff University. And this is playing a couple of aspects of psychology. So the first bit is highlighting a bit of threat, like your inbox is at risk. Then this very precise number to imply authority. And then trying to counter our optimism bias. Now, your inbox is an equal threat to everybody else's, because we all have this optimism that nothing bad is going to happen to us. So pulling that all together, thinking about when we intervene and help people, every behaviour takes place in a context. There's going to be some sort of trigger that leads to an action. And we've really been getting this completely wrong as an industry. E-learning sits over here. It's not in the context where the threat lies. It's very likely to be forgotten. And it's simply not the way our brain works. When we're in a risky situation, we don't go, what did I learn 6 months ago? That's not how our brain works. We react very quickly to the context. And then, of course, you've got your phishing sim sat over here. There are other tools over here as well where they're looking at behaviours, perhaps drawing data from the SIEM. The problem is all you can really do is follow up after the fact. And scientists increasingly think that we don't really make many decisions before the fact. We rationalise most of our decisions after the fact. And so we will just go, yeah, no, I did that for a very, very good reason, and you don't really learn. So this is where we need to be intervening. Either here, priming people in the context before the behaviour happens, or even better here, as someone is actually doing some sort of risky behaviour. They're about to upload a file, they're about to click a link. And if we can intervene at this point, we can also silently track. So you can get that data on, well, how often are people making this mistake? How often are they uploading files, downloading files, connecting to insecure Wi-Fi? And then you've set a lovely baseline that you can prove impact from. So I'll very quickly whiz through some examples of what this could look like. So some stories drop straight onto the desktop. This is about just bringing content straight to you with these little red flag stories. They take about 90 seconds. But you're getting these in and around your day-to-day workflow. So it's just security becomes part of your day-to-day. And then maybe as you open your inbox, a little reminder. But then this is where it gets more fun. So I'm sure none of you would actually click on this link, but imagine you were about to. As you're about to hover over it, just that little nudge that say, hold on, you don't know this sender. And this is that we tell people to stop and think, but that's not how the brain works. You actually need a little bit of help to stop and think, to knock you off that autopilot. Okay, I think I may have put my half-hour presentation in here instead of the 15-minute one. So this is some of the data that you can get off the back of this. So some real measurable impact, real behaviour change, not tracking things like phishing sims and link clicks where you can get whatever click rate you want depending on how easy you set the bait, but real behaviours, real click rates on real emails coming down by 72%. This is a great stat on that side, left-hand side, from Doc Martin. So their mantra is rebellious self-expression. So you'll imagine how many people did the mandatory training. I think 26% is quite high in that context. So we now drop content onto their desktop every single month, and we've been there 4 years now, consistently 90% each month. Because it comes to them, it's there, it's kind of in the way that we're used to engaging with content nowadays. A few more examples of what that looks like, because there's lots of threats out there beyond phishing. So maybe if I actually click that link and start to enter my password, maybe if I'm trying to upload a file somewhere. A classic one of putting too many email addresses in the to box. This we're doing a lot for people at the moment, maybe just helping them see how much LLMs are being used, but also giving that gentle nudge. If you block it, people will find another way of doing it. They'll just take a photo of their screen. So monitor it, nudge it, steer people to say, look, please don't put company data in here, or please use this tool. I won't go through this, but this is really just my sort of story of there's a real risk that if you get your nudges wrong and you're doing it after the fact, then you're turning into nagging. So you really need to try and get here timely, in advance, before people make those risky behaviours. Thank you very much. If you've got any questions, want to find out more, our stand is just outside that door. We'd love to answer any questions you've got. Thank you.